guys, welcome back to Days of Darkness and welcome to my review for Hereditary. This one came out in 2018. It is starring Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, and Millie Shapiro, and was directed by Ari Aster. So, this is a movie that I have been wanting to review for quite a long time, man. It's one of those films that, how do I say this? I'll put it to you this way. I have been watching this shit for a very long time. A very, very long time. And it is very rare for a film to stick with me like this one has. It's one of those movies that where, you know, when people say like, oh, well, horror just isn't scary anymore and yada, yada, yada and all this bullshit. One of the first films I recommend is Hereditary. And that is because there is some horrifying content in this. Like, absolutely just heartbreaking shit. And I feel like in the hands of, I'm not going to say any filmmaker, because I think there are plenty of capable filmmakers who would have done this story justice, but Ari Aster just has a way of not shying away from anything and being very blunt in the presentation of this movie. This movie does not hold back. It does not pull any punches, and I respect the fuck out of it for that. And this film also has some things personally for me going for it that I can relate to quite a bit, and we will get to that later on in the review. But again, you know, just the story here is done such justice by how Ari Aster directed it. And also the talent in this film. I just listed off the three starring cast members. But they're not the only ones. Everybody in this film is fucking phenomenal. Gotta start out with Toni Collette, man. You know, it's sour grapes at this point. It is what it is, but the fact that this woman did not get nominated for an Oscar from this performance, to me, just speaks to the fact that the Academy does not take horror seriously, and I think that's horseshit. I think that's absolute fucking bullshit for this movie and several others that have just been snubbed over and over and over again. It's dog shit. But her performance is the exact opposite of dog shit. I think she, and I, you know, I've always loved Toni Collette too, but like, she just goes to a place in this film. And she's even said it in interviews. It's like, I can't not feel the things that I'm performing. That's a very loose quote, but that's basically what she said. And so the fact, you know, once we discuss some of the shit we're going to be talking about, it's like, she goes to some fucking hard places, man. Some really, really rough shit. And, you know, the performance just showcases that more and more throughout the film. It is just absolutely fucking incredible. She did a phenomenal job. Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, no different. The gentleman, I cannot remember his name right now, who played the father as well. I think he is a character that is not talked about enough in this film. And just, you know, here's this man who is trying to stay strong for his family, and there's a part in this movie where he just cracks. And he doesn't, like, you know, go ballistic. He doesn't go insane, but he just sits in this car and he almost runs a red light, and then he just starts fucking wailing, man. He just starts crying. And it's like, I completely get it. Like, I totally understand, man. Because the shit that these characters deal with in this movie, yeah, I probably would have broken down way before he did. But overall, man, just a fucking phenomenal film. And I wanted to really quickly interlace a personal story as well. If you watched my video on the top, I think it was 8 or 5 films that scared me, like legitimately scared me, this was on that list. The first time when I watched this was with my mom. And if you know anything about this movie, this film deals with familial trauma quite heavily, which I can relate to. And before we had sat down to watch the film, we were just arguing over some stupid bullshit. I can't even remember what it was. But, you know, a typical mom and son just arguing over fucking whatever. and we sat down and watched this movie. By the time it was over, we just looked at each other and we're like, I'm sorry. Like fuck, man. This movie just does that in the weirdest way. It kind of kind of repaired something there that would have been repaired regardless, because me and my mom are homies. This movie just has a very, very distinct impact on me, as well as her, just given our own history with stuff. But yeah, man, this movie greatly impacted me, but it doesn't necessarily have the same impact on everybody else. I've, met plenty of people who, for one reason or another, do not enjoy this film. And I'll say this right off the rip. There are some horror fans who will say, oh, how could you not like this? Like, oh my god, how could you? Or, on the other side is, oh my god, how could you enjoy this movie? This movie's trash. This movie's shit. If you're that person, don't do that. It's such a shitty way to discuss film with people. There are plenty of films that I fucking flat out do not like. For one reason or another, I just fucking hate them. But I am also, realistic enough to understand that at the end of the day, film is art. And not everybody is going to interpret art the same way. Two people could look at an abstract painting and see something completely different. I always like to compare it to a Rorschach test. It's like you show two different people with two completely different mindsets, one Rorschach painting, and both of them are going to have a completely different interpretation of that painting. Rorschach painting is really anything. And film is no different. And I've heard a lot of people mostly have a problem with the pace of this film, which I get. This movie does not have a breakneck pace. It is very deliberate. It is very calculated in the things that it shows you. For me personally, I don't think there's a moment in this film that is done without intention. I feel like everything here, whether it's a simple scene of two people exchanging dialogue, or one of the big impactful horror moments towards the end of the film, I feel like everything is done with intention. But not everybody consumes horror that way, and that's okay. So mainly this whole little interlude here is to say, like what you like, don't like what you don't like. Just be open to things and be open to other different opinions. That's what Days of Darkness is all about. But for me, personally, I fucking love this movie. And this movie really is a story about a family being ripped apart at the seams. It is a movie about familial trauma. And yes, there is cult activity and a lot of demonic shit going on in this movie, all of which we will talk about for the most part. I'm not going to go down a complete plot rundown, because for this film in particular, I feel like if I did that, we'd be here all fucking day. If you want to know what the plot is, go watch the movie. It's about 2 hours and 7 minutes long. Not atrociously long, at least for me. But yeah, go watch the movie, come back, and we'll fucking talk about it, man. That's what it's all about. But yeah, man, this is a movie about a family just completely being ripped apart from the selfish, horrible actions of one family member. I won't get into too much detail. That's not what this video is about. But like I said, that is something that is very real for me. And it is a very real part of my story. Was I born with the intention of being the vessel for one of the kings of hell? No. But just, the stuff that goes down in this film, on that end of things, the familial trauma aspect, I can relate to quite a bit. I know I'm not the only one who can. So I feel like this movie does have quite a different impact on people with a story like that. Again, if you have been born with the intention of becoming a vessel for a king of hell, condolences. I laugh about that, but fuck, man, some of the shit I hear about in the real world, it wouldn't surprise me. So, but no, man, I think on the real life trauma end of things, I feel like this movie handles the subject matter very well. I feel like Ari Aster and everybody else involved really approached that end of the subject matter very bluntly. Like I said, they don't shy away from it. They don't, make it out to be something that it's not. And I respect that. I respect that quite a bit. And then when you bring in the cult aspect of things and the very real demonic shit going down, it just adds more and more to the intensity. And going back to the pacing and why some people have a problem with it, a lot of the horrifying moments early on in the film have really nothing to do with any demonic shit. Obviously, there are sprinklings here and there of something going on, most notably in the form of an apparition of Annie's dead mother, where when Annie turns out the lights, there is a very clear image, a hallucination of her mother, of Ellen Lay. Lay? I think it's Lay. Ellen Lay, who is just standing there, just with this creepy ass smile on her face, and the shadows are obscuring it, and it's like it's clearly her, but it's like as soon as she flips those light on, it's gone. So there are obvious signs of something paranormal happening here, but a lot of the scarier moments, the more tension-filled moments, just have to do with the family dynamic. The fact that Annie is an extremely traumatized woman who has had to deal with, as you know, she didn't know this, but has had to deal with a cult leader mother for her entire life. And it's like, her brother was committed suicide when he was, I believe she said 16. Her father starved himself to death, all due to the psychological torture that this woman put them through. And then when she ended up having kids, the cycle just continues, and it was just this awful, awful life for her. So then when it comes time for the opening of the film at this funeral, she has like no emotion. She is not, she is not impacted by this whatsoever. Like, she's sad mostly because of the relationship her and her mother could have had, but for the most part, she is just very, very, just kind of in this passive state. And it's a very, very contrasting mood compared to the next funeral that we see in the film. And you get to see how this life has impacted her current family. The fact that her and her son really don't communicate well at all. And there's just a block there. And we find out later why that is, because of her sleepwalking, and she just covered both of her children in lighter fluid as well as paint thinner, and was getting ready to set herself and her two children on fucking fire. And it's like, my God. So clearly the cult activity has had some sort of impact on her. Maybe it was just sleepwalking and this subconscious desire to die, which we do, get blatantly later on when she literally says, "I just want to die." But not only is her relationship with her son quite difficult, but her daughter as well, young Charlie, 13-year-old Charlie. It's explained in the film that, when Peter was born, Annie was having nothing to do with her mom. She was like, she wouldn't even let her get close to him in any way, shape, or form. She's like, "No, you're a manipulator. You're just an awful fucking person. I want you to have nothing to do with my child." Which I get. But somewhere along the line, once Charlie was born, she lightened up a little bit towards her mom, which was a big, big, big fucking mistake. She just immediately, as Annie says, sinks her claws, metaphorically, into Charlie. And, we see that once the grandmother dies, once Ellen dies, the only person it was really impacted negatively is Charlie. And we find out later on why that is. But, she is distraught. She can't believe it. And there are some heartbreaking scenes between her and her mom, where it's just, this does not feel like a mother-daughter relationship whatsoever. The scene where Annie comes up to her in her bed and like is like trying to console her, and and Charlie just asks her, well, "Who's gonna take care of me?" And her mom's like, "What? What? Like you don't think I'm gonna take care of you?" It's like that woman just completely severed any emotional relationship between those two, and it's sad as fuck. And sure, Annie still loves Charlie, no doubt about it. And we see that when Charlie does end up dying in the film, just how emotionally shattered this woman is because of it. But there is still a very visible disconnect between those two. Speaking of which, I just brought it up. Once Charlie's demise does happen in the film, very brutally, very awful, awful, grotesque way for a child to perish, it really does kick off the horror aspect of things. Because it is pretty clear, in my view, having seen this film a couple times, that Charlie was, for the 13 years that she did live, was the host of Payman, who is the demon which Ellen, the grandmother's whole cult revolved around. That's who those fucking psychos worship, is one of the 8 kings of hell, Payman. And so Ellen's whole goal was to find Payman a human host, which had to be male, which you can, gather in the film, throughout the film. Obviously, her son killed himself after accusing his mother of putting people inside him, which you can pretty much gather what that entails. So she couldn't really do it with him because he killed himself. So then years later, Annie wants her to have nothing to do with his son. So once Charlie comes into the picture, once Charlie is born, Ellen now is able to get access to that child, but Payman needs a male host. That is the whole deal. So I guess the idea is, hey, take over this kid for now, and I'll get you the other one later. Which is fucked up, and it really just shows that Ellen never really gave a fuck about either of them whatsoever. It was all for the purpose of bringing back the great Payman to walk the earth once again. Absolutely horrendous, awful shit. But once Charlie does die, now that being is released into the world and starts fucking with the Lay family really, really bad. It starts, once again, if I get into all of it here, we're going to be here forever. This review is probably already going to be on the longer side, so I'll spare you. But lots of horrifying, awful, terrifying shit. And each family member has a drastically different reaction to all of this demonic activity going on. Obviously, Annie probably, I don't know if the worst of it would be the right term, but she deals with quite a bit of it, once she meets Joan at the grief counseling stuff. She's the one who kind of introduces Annie to the whole seance stuff, which, by the way, another very, very well-written character. Evil as fuck is Joan, who is Ellen's, best fucking friend in this cult. But just the sheer manipulative undertones of that character and just totally emotionally prying at Annie and just digging into her and really getting to just completely get her to go along with whatever she's saying. Obviously, Annie has a lot of hesitance towards certain things like the seance and whatever. But at the end of the day, she gives Joan everything she wanted. Everything Joan wanted from her, Annie gave to her. So it's really sad, and it really does kind of reflect on the relationship that I'm sure Annie had with her mom, which is, fucking crazy. She's going down that supernatural route, and she's really starting to buy into the fact that something is fucking wrong here. And really, Annie's the one, once she performs that seance in the house, that she's really the one who unleashes Payman, full throttle. And really, all she was trying to do was bring back Charlie, which, who's to say if there was ever really a Charlie to begin with, because clearly, once that soul is resurrected, it's not a kid. This is not a child. This This is something much deeper. And it really does amplify the tragedy of it, is that you can kind of tell that there's still a kid in there, you know, but it's just constantly, this soul is just constantly battling with this enormously powerful demonic presence when Charlie is alive. So, you know, just sad shit overall. As I said, Annie's going down that route. Steve, the dad, who is like I said, very underrated character in this film, who is just trying to guide his family through this horrible time. Does not really believe any of this paranormal shit that Annie's spewing. He's just, you know, he's watching his wife, in his mind, just lose her fucking shit and go insane. You know, his son is dealing with some pretty traumatic shit as well, which we'll get into him in a second. But this guy's just at his wit's end. And like I said, there's that moment where he almost runs that red, and he just finally breaks down. He just for some reason, that's the thing that just, that's it. And he just completely breaks down. You know, he gets himself back into it, but you can see him just slowly deteriorate throughout the film. And it's very sad, especially since how that character does end up, you know, dying. But then there's Peter, and Peter's the one who was, albeit unintentionally, but he was the one responsible for Charlie's death. So he's this teenager, you know, he's just normal fucking kid, just going through high school, just trying to figure out his way in the world, and then he has to deal with this just absolutely unbearable weight of guilt, just of the fact that in a lot of ways he is responsible for Charlie's death. Not fully, because Annie was the one who encouraged him to bring Charlie to the party, and there's a whole fucking thing there that we won't get into, but, you know, obviously he did have a hand, and he just, you can see it just eats away at him, and he's trying to deflect it and trying not to think about it, but fuck, man, how could you not, you know? So all three family members are extremely, extremely emotionally vulnerable by this point. And once Annie does that seance, then it's just no holds barred from there. She tries to, you know, she needs to have a link to Charlie, which, to do the seance and stuff. So she has Charlie's sketchbook. And once she realizes that, you know, this is not Charlie, this is something else, and this is something evil, she tries to burn it, which gets her arm caught on fire. So she eventually realizes, it's like, fuck, I have to, in order to truly get this thing away from my family, I have to kill myself. Because in her mind, since she's the one who brought it, if she burns that link, she will burn as well. And the scene of her just pleading and begging her husband, Steve, who just discovered, I didn't even talk about this. Again, if I talk about everything in this fucking film, we'll be here forever, but they each just discovered that the cult beheaded her mother's dead body and brought her up to the attic of their house, which was an absolutely disgusting, gross fucking scene. Just this rotting, dead, green fucking corpse. Just disgusting. All the flies flying around and shit. But Steve is convinced that Annie has just lost her fucking mind, and that she's the one who did this and brought her mother's corpse up to the fucking attic, and it's just stressful even talking about it. Meanwhile, Annie's just begging him, because she thinks this is it. She thinks she's gonna fucking die as soon as he throws this fucking book, this sketchbook, into the fire. And she's like just telling him, like, baby, you're the love of my life. I love you no matter what, and yada, yada, yada. And he thinks about doing it, but then he just refuses. He's like, no, this isn't healthy for you. I can't do this. I can't play into this shit anymore. You're fucking sick. You need help. And just the typical things any rational person would say in this situation. And it just makes it all the more tragic that, you know, Annie just finally says fuck it, and she snatches the book out of his hands, And she throws it into the fire, and we will get into Kill of the Film, but yeah, as soon as she throws it in there, it is made very clear that Payman played a very, very cruel trick on her, and it is Steve who is the one who ends up fucking just bursting in the flames, and it's just absolutely fucking heartbreaking. And as soon as that happens, Annie is now at the point where she's just broken. She's just watching her husband just completely consumed in this hellfire, and is slowly having his flesh melted off and is slowly dying. And she's just at this point now where she is completely, utterly just psychologically broken. And at that point, Annie basically dies as well, because Payman is now able to completely, totally, utterly just consume her and possesses her. And that kind of gives us our final chase of the film. And we have Peter waking up from his psychological break. I guess you could define it as that. Definitely had some Payman influence there too. Which, by the way, what a sick ass fucking scene where he just busts his fucking face right on that desk. And that scene before where he just fucking just has his hand up and he doing this fucking weird facial contortion shit that I can't do, as you clearly just saw. But just fucking insane scene there, man. But yeah, so he wakes up from that whole debacle, and it's hard to say because there are some horrifying shots in this film. But the scene of Annie, now a now possessed Annie, just fucking, first of all, just being in the corner of his room, and is just up there in the top corner, just fucking hanging there. It just, oh, it's fucking awful in the best way possible. I watched this actually with my fiance, and she's not as big into this shit as I am, so there were some films that landed on the banned list for a while, and Hereditary was one of those films. And finally, she was like, "I think I'm ready." I'm like, "Are you ready?" She's like, "Yeah," and handled it pretty well. But that scene of Annie, just that shot, because you can barely see it too. Ari Aster does a really good job of planting little details in certain shots that you really can't see, but then like you're like, did I see that? Is that real? And then like with that one, man, she's obscured just enough to where like you're looking at Peter and like it just holds for so long, and finally you look up and you're like, fuck. Like, just an awesome shot, man. Really good shit there. Yeah, and she had a very similar reaction. She's like, oh my god. Oh man. But anyways, there's that, and then the following shot of that close up, that low angle shot of Peter, and you just see her. The only way I can describe it is you see her skitter across the ceiling. And it's just completely silent. It's fucking horrifying, man. But he eventually makes his way downstairs, and he sees this. Well, first of all, he sees his dad's, charbroiled fucking corpse just on the fucking ground, and you can see his wedding ring. Just sad as shit. And then he sees this fucking cult member. These guys like being naked for some reason. At the end of this movie, they're all just fucking naked. And none of them are the type of people who should be naked. All people are beautiful. It's not what I mean. It's just, could have done without seeing this guy's cock and balls. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, man, he has that creepy fucking smile. Horrifying, dude. And then Annie bursts out of that dark corner, and we get a phenomenal, pretty brief, but really fucking scary chase. Peter sprints up into that fucking attic, man, and she's bashing her fucking head on the attic door. It's just, oh my god, Annie's completely gone by this point. And eventually, the knocking ceases, if you will, and he sees something absolutely horrifying. Somehow, Annie made her way into the attic and is now floating in the air, and we'll get to that at Kill of the Film, but he sees that horrifying, just completely traumatic, awful shit. And then we see, again, just three naked ass fucking cult members just standing there. And he just, at that point, once again, he's just like, alright, fuck this. And he just runs out of the fucking window and just crashes all the way to the fucking ground. Now, I hear debate back and forth on if Peter is dead or not. I can go either way with it because that was a pretty bad fall. But like, I also, as warped as this may sound, I like to think of him still being alive, much like Annie just completely psychologically breaking when she sees her husband just consumed in these flames. I like to think Peter at that point is just, at that point, physically and mentally broken enough to where Payman can now inhabit his body, since Annie is without a head at this point, so Payman no longer needs that body. So then he goes to the psychologically broken Peter, which leads us to the ending shot of the film, which, again, this thing is filled with some really, really good shit, but that ending of him just slowly climbing up that ladder and then just standing in that treehouse, and just all these cult members, the headless bodies of Peter's grandmother and mother, just bowing to Charlie's severed fucking head on this statue. It's just, you're already so broken having watching this film, and now you're seeing all of this shit just boom after boom after boom, and you're like, oh god. And then we get the very, very well delivered dialogue from Joan. Phenomenal delivery from that actress, and that carries us out, man. And we get a very, very bleak ending where Payman is now has his male host and is now free to walk the earth. And, you know, I've seen people hypothesize of what happens after the events of this film, and I hope to God we never get a sequel to this. As much as I love this film, it doesn't need it. People have been clamoring for it in some small circles. No. I think the ambiguity of what happens next should be left up to the imagination. And yeah, so absolutely phenomenal film. I know I ran down the ending of the movie a little bit. If I did that for the whole film, would have been a much longer review than it already probably is. I'm betting we're gonna hit the 40-minute mark here. So but yeah, guys, that'll do it for the review portion of the video. But you know what we gotta do now, baby? We gotta get into the blood, the guts, and the gory bits. We gotta get into my Kill the Film. Stick around. Hereditary is not a splatterfest. It is not just a complete gore-tastic adventure or anything like that. But I will say, when this movie wants to get fucking brutal, much like the other subject matter in this film, it does not fucking hold back. This film can get extremely, extremely bloody when it wants to. I already gave away the burn kill with Steve just being completely engulfed in flames. But one detail I did not share is once Annie throws that sketchbook into the fire and she turns around and she sees her husband just completely from the feet all the way up until the head, very quickly getting engulfed in these flames. There is a moment where you can see Steve's face and just the sheer, there's something about the look and the expression on his face that is just so fucking heartbreaking and horrifying. And it's like in that split moment, all the skepticism went away. And he just immediately knew. Everything that my wife has said was right, but it's not like he really has a whole lot of time to think about it, does he? Just absolutely fucking terrifying shit there, man. Annie, once she's I did spare the detail in the review, but when she's floating up in the attic and Peter just watches her take piano wire to her fucking neck and just basically decapitate herself. Holy fuck. To have the main character of your film die in such a way was very ballsy and a very crazy fucking move. And just the way it's executed as well. No pun intended, but just the way it's done, where Peter, it's just complete silence. That her bashing her fucking head against the door is done. He just walks around. He sees where his grandmother's body once was, and is no longer there. And he sees those eyes fucking scratched out of his picture, just laying in that fucking that circle of candles. And all of a sudden, he starts hearing. And it starts getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And he looks up and he just sees his mom just. And the blood's fucking spurting out of her neck. And she just eventually starts going. And oh my god. And just the fact that while that's happening, then he sees the naked cult members and he leaps out of the window. And we don't see the ending of it, but we still hear that. And then all of a sudden, rip! And plop, and then we see the shadow of Annie's now decapitated corpse floating her way to the treehouse for the final scene of the movie. Wow, holy fuck. Would definitely be kill of the film if not for Charlie's death. Them going to that party, it's previously, made clear that she is allergic to nuts. And she already doesn't want to be there. Peter's trying to get laid. He's trying to talk to this girl. Charlie's trying to go with him. He goes, oh, hey, there's cake. There's cake over there. Like, go have some cake. She's like, I don't know anybody. He's like, it's okay. It's fine. Just go. And sure enough, man, she eats that cake and immediately her fucking throat just starts, swell. As someone I'm personally allergic to cats. And I had an experience one time where I was around so fucking many cats, dude, and my throat just started burning, man. I was like, oh god, it was fucking terrible. It was only, I guess it would have been the equivalent if I would have swallowed a bunch of fucking, cat dandruff, which I don't know what circumstance I would ever be in to do that, but I imagine it would be the equivalent of that. And she just completely, her throat starts closing up. She starts breaking out in hives, and eventually she grabs Peter. And Peter's trying to rush her to the hospital, man. And once that happens, I love the little detail, too, of him heading to the party. And they drive past the telephone pole that has the cult logo scratched into it. Just as a way of them knowing it's like this was going to happen from the very start. And it's like, it just feels like the cult is already like 3 steps ahead of the family with every single turn. It's like, ugh. It really just gives that feeling of there is nothing these characters can do. They are just fucked. And that's it. It's a very, very sad film in that way. But anyways, Charlie does grab him. They rush to the hospital. And a very conveniently placed, I think it's a dead deer? It's a deer or a cow, one of the two. I would assume deer. I don't know, though. A dead fucking animal. A dead, big fucking animal is just laying in the fucking middle of the road, and Peter swerves. At this point, Charlie is leaning out of the window just to get some sort of air into her fucking throat. And once Peter swerves, man, her head just makes contact with that fucking pole, man. And it's just, oh my god. And it's like, you can obviously tell it killed her, but you can't, upon a first viewing, you can't really tell what exactly happened. It looks like, okay, she might have just gotten hit and just the blunt force trauma killed her. But that shot later, man, and once, the scene afterwards is just as horrifying. Once Annie eventually finds her daughter's headless corpse in one of the family cars, and she just breaks down, and that's where we get the, I just want to die, it hurts too much. But like, why can't I just die and all this shit? It's like, oh my god. And you just hear all of this, and Peter's just clutching his pillow. It's like, oh man, it's just heartbreaking shit. And that's within those scenes, that's when we get the reveal of Charlie's just fucking severed head being eaten by these maggots. Her jaw is completely fucking gone. It's just disgusting, horrifying, heartbreaking. That's Hereditary, man. That's my kill of the film, dude. It's just an absolute fucking whirlwind of a kill and a whirlwind of a fucking movie, man. Well, that'll do it for Hereditary, guys. Thank you for the patience on waiting for this review. Took me a little longer than I would have liked, but I just really wanted to make sure I did this film justice, and I hope I did. So that'll do it for Hereditary, man. Amazing fucking movie. I definitely recommend you fucking check it out however you can, as long as it's, legal and all that shit. But yeah, man, next time on Days of Darkness, we are going to be continuing the Purge series when we take a look at The Purge Anarchy. Very excited to see The Purge get taken to the streets and see what that's all about. But until then, man, thank you as always for stopping by. Thank you for supporting the dream. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and for the love of all things gory, keep watching horror. Hail, Payman!